Lena had been driving for hours across the long desert highway, and the sky above her was already turning a deep shade of blue. The sun had gone down behind the wide mountains, leaving the road empty and quiet. She was on her way to visit her aunt in a small town she had never seen before. Her aunt had recently moved there and invited Lena to spend a few days with her, promising peace, fresh air, and open land. Lena liked the idea of a break from her busy city life, so she had packed her bags, filled her car with snacks, and started the long journey with excitement. But as the night grew darker, the excitement slowly changed into a strange feeling in her stomach. The road was too empty. The only sound she could hear was the hum of her car engine and the soft wind brushing against the windows. Her phone signal had disappeared more than an hour ago, which she did not expect. She thought at least some part of the highway would have network coverage, but the screen showed only one phrase: no service. She tried to ignore it and kept driving. She checked the fuel gauge again, then the temperature, then the clock. Everything seemed normal, but suddenly, without warning, the car jerked. A strange sound came from the engine, something she had never heard before. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. The car jerked again, louder this time, and then slowly lost power. The lights dimmed, and the car rolled forward until it stopped completely on the side of the road. Lena's heart sank. She tried turning the key again, but the car made a tired, weak sound, as if it was struggling to breathe. She tried again and again, but nothing changed. She leaned back in her seat and exhaled slowly, trying to stay calm. She wasn't far from the town, but she had no idea how she would get there now. She stepped out of the car, the cool night air brushing against her face. The desert was quiet, too quiet. The silence made her feel even more alone. She looked around, empty land on both sides, stretching into darkness. There were no houses, no lights, no cars passing by. Just her and the broken vehicle under a wide sky filled with stars. Lena grabbed her phone from her pocket and tried to call anyone she could think of, even though she already knew what the screen would show. It still said, no service. She lifted the phone up, searching the sky as if the signal would fall from somewhere. But nothing changed. She put the phone down and took a deep breath. "Okay, it's fine," she whispered to herself. "Someone will pass by soon." She opened her car's trunk, took out a small flashlight and looked around the engine, though she knew nothing about car mechanics. Still, she felt she had to try. Maybe a cable had come loose, or maybe something simple had happened. But as she pointed the flashlight at the engine, all she could see were parts she didn't understand. Everything looked connected and normal, though she couldn't be sure. Minutes passed slowly. Lena sat in the driver's seat again and kept the door slightly open to let in some air. The desert night was surprisingly cold, much colder than she expected. She rubbed her arms to warm herself and kept glancing at the empty road. After what felt like a long time, she finally saw headlights in the distance. A car, or maybe a truck, was approaching. Her heart lifted with hope. She stepped out and waved her hand gently so they would notice her. As the lights came closer, she realized it wasn't just one vehicle. It looked like a group, maybe 3 or 4 men riding horses and a truck driving behind them slowly. They seemed to be coming from the direction of a small bar she had passed earlier before her car broke down. The first man who reached her was sitting on a brown horse. He looked relaxed, as if he had been riding for fun. He wore a dusty hat, boots, and a jacket that smelled faintly of smoke and old leather. He smiled widely at her, a smile that made it clear he had been drinking. His words confirmed it when he spoke. "Well, look at that," he said with a laugh. "A traveler all alone at night." Lena felt a wave of uneasiness. She adjusted her grip on the flashlight and stepped back slightly. "My car stopped working," she said politely, trying not to show her discomfort. "I was hoping someone could help or maybe call a tow truck when you reach town." The man laughed again, louder this time, and looked back at the others who were slowly approaching. "Hear that, boys? She needs help." His tone was teasing, not concerned. The others chuckled lightly, though one of them looked tired and uninterested in the situation. Lena forced a small smile, trying to stay calm. "If anyone has a phone signal," she continued, "I'd really appreciate—" "Signal?" the man interrupted. "There's no signal for miles out here. This area's been like that for years." "Oh," she said quietly. She had hoped maybe someone else would have better luck with their phone. "But don't you worry," he said, leaning slightly toward her. "We can help. You can come with us. We're headed back into town anyway." His voice was cheerful, but there was something about his tone that made Lena uncomfortable. Something too relaxed for the situation. Something too familiar, as if he assumed she would simply agree. She shook her head gently. "Thank you, but I think I should stay with my car. Someone else might pass by." The man raised an eyebrow. "This road?" he said, making a dramatic gesture at the empty land around them. "Nobody comes here at this hour." His horse moved slightly closer, and Lena stepped back again. She kept her smile soft, trying not to offend him. "I appreciate the offer. Maybe if you could just inform someone in town that I'm stuck here?" The man laughed again, but this time it wasn't a friendly sound. It was the kind of laugh people use when they don't like being turned down. His eyes narrowed just a little, not enough to be obvious, but enough for Lena to notice. "You sure you want to stay out here all night?" he asked in a slower voice. "Town's not far. You'll be safer coming along." Before she could reply, one of the men behind him spoke. "Dale, leave her alone. Let's go. It's late." Dale, the man on the horse, turned his head sharply. "Relax," he said. "I'm just being friendly." Lena could see the others were trying to keep things calm, but they also didn't want to annoy Dale. It was clear he was the loudest one in the group, maybe the one who liked to lead or at least act like it. She sighed softly and tried again. "Thank you, really, but I'll be fine. Someone will come eventually." Dale shrugged as if pretending not to care, but the look in his eyes didn't match his relaxed expression. He stared at her for a long moment, long enough for Lena to feel her heartbeat pick up. She didn't show fear, but she felt it rising inside her. Just then, a distant sound cut through the quiet desert, a vehicle approaching. This time, it wasn't a group of cowboys. It was a single car, moving quickly, its headlights steady and bright. Dale looked over his shoulder, annoyed. "Who's out here now?" The vehicle came closer, and Lena felt a sudden rush of relief when she saw the familiar shape of a police cruiser. The word sheriff was clearly printed on the side. She felt her breath loosen, believing help had finally arrived. But the moment the sheriff stepped out of the car and looked at her, she felt something shift inside her. His expression was not the warm, reassuring look she expected. Instead, his eyes were cold, sharp, and uninterested, as if he already knew what was happening and didn't care. Her relief slowly faded as the sheriff approached, and she wondered if she had truly been saved, or if her trouble was only just beginning. The sheriff's boots made a slow, heavy sound on the road as he walked toward them. His face stayed serious, and he kept adjusting the belt around his waist as if he were bothered by something. Lena hoped he would take control of the situation, but the look in his eyes did not give her the comfort she expected. It felt like he was studying everything, not with concern, but with quiet irritation. Dale straightened up on his horse as if the sheriff's presence gave him confidence rather than caution. He smiled proudly, almost like he had been waiting for the sheriff to show up. His friends grew quiet, watching carefully as the law officer approached. The sheriff looked at Lena first, then at her car, then at the group of cowboys. "What's going on here?" he asked in a dry voice, not sounding surprised or worried, just impatient. Lena opened her mouth to speak, but Dale spoke faster. "Sheriff Collins, look what we found," he said, pointing at her with a small grin. "Poor girl stuck out here all alone. We were just trying to help her." Lena blinked. She wasn't expecting him to speak for her. She stepped forward slightly. "My car stopped working," she said in a steady voice. She refused our help," Dale cut in again, louder this time. "We offered to take her to town. It's not safe out here." Lena felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Dale's words weren't lies, but the way he said them made it sound like she was the one being difficult. She tried again. "I only asked them to inform someone in town to send a tow truck." The sheriff held up a hand, stopping her from continuing. His eyes didn't soften. Instead, he turned to the cowboys. "You boys drinking again?" he asked. One of them sighed. "We just left the bar, Sheriff. We were heading home." Sheriff Collins nodded slowly, as if he already knew the answer. Then he looked at Dale specifically. "And you?" he asked. "You causing trouble?" Dale pressed a hand dramatically to his chest. "Me? I'm helping a stranded traveler, that's all." He gave a smile that showed he wasn't taking anything seriously. The sheriff's expression didn't change. He turned back to Lena. She waited for questions, normal questions, the kind an officer would ask in such a situation. But instead, he asked something unexpected. "Why didn't you accept their help?" he asked, his voice calm but cold. Lena felt her breath catch. She wasn't sure what kind of answer he wanted. I didn't feel comfortable leaving my car," she said honestly. "I thought someone could call for help from town." The sheriff looked at her as if her answer annoyed him. "This road barely sees cars after sunset," he said. "You'll be waiting until morning." "I don't mind waiting," she said softly. "I just want my car taken care of." The sheriff glanced at her vehicle again, then spoke in a slow voice, almost as if he were explaining something to a child. "It's going to be cold tonight," he said, "and animals move around out here. You sure you want to stay alone in the dark?" Lena swallowed hard. She knew he was trying to make her second-guess herself, but she didn't want to go anywhere with a group of strangers who made her uncomfortable, and the sheriff's behavior didn't feel reassuring either. Something about his tone suggested he was siding with Dale, even without hearing her fully. Dale dismounted from his horse and walked closer, but not too close. "Sheriff's right," he said. "Look, no need to make this difficult. We're going to town anyway. You can ride with us. Real simple." Lena stepped back slightly. "No, thank you," she said softly but firmly. The sheriff's jaw tightened. "You refusing help from the locals?" "I'm not refusing help," she said, trying to stay calm. "I only want a tow truck or someone official to help me with the car. I don't feel safe leaving it." The sheriff let out a long exhale, the type that someone gives when they're running low on patience. He adjusted his hat and gave a small, slow shake of his head. "You city people always think you know what's best," he muttered. "This town runs differently. Sometimes you take the help that's offered." Lena felt her heart beat faster. She had never been spoken to like that by a law officer. Something about the sheriff's tone made her feel more alone than before. She looked at the group of men behind Dale. One of them shifted uncomfortably, another avoided eye contact. Only Dale looked amused. "Sheriff Collins," Lena said quietly, trying one more time. "I don't want to go with them. I appreciate the concern. But I only want—" "Enough," he said sharply, cutting her off again. The sudden authority in his voice made the night feel colder. She stood frozen, unsure what to say next. The sheriff stepped closer and looked at her car again, inspecting it slowly as if he were searching for something wrong. He tapped the hood with his knuckles. "This thing won't start tonight," he said, "and we don't tow cars at this hour." Lena felt frustration building inside her. "So what should I do?" she asked softly. Dale answered before the sheriff could. "Come with us," he said simply, shrugging. "See? Problem solved." The sheriff did not correct him. He didn't even comment. Instead, he looked at Lena with an expression that told her he expected her to agree. A chill went through her. She looked around at the empty desert, the quiet highway, the dark sky, the weak flashlight in her hand. She felt cornered, not because anyone had touched her, but because every voice seemed to push her in a direction she didn't choose. She tried one last time. "Sheriff," she said, choosing her words carefully, "can you please call another officer or a station worker? Someone official who can help?" The sheriff's eyes narrowed just slightly, but it was enough for her to understand he didn't like being questioned. "I'm the sheriff of this town," he said slowly, as if reminding her of something obvious. "You don't need anyone else." Lena felt her pulse quicken. She looked at Dale, then at the sheriff, then at the dark road behind her. Something told her that leaving with either of them was not a good idea. She stood her ground, even though her legs felt weak. "Please," she said again, almost a whisper, "I just need proper help." The sheriff stared at her for a long moment. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Then he finally turned to Dale. "Take your boys and go home," he said. Dale blinked, surprised. "What? Sheriff, I'm just trying to—" "Go," the sheriff repeated, firmer this time. The men behind Dale quickly nodded and started to move. Dale, however, hesitated. He looked at Lena with a stare that held something unreadable. Something disappointed, something annoyed. But without further argument, he mounted his horse and rode off with the others. Lena breathed out, feeling lighter now that the group had left. But the relief didn't last long. The sheriff turned back to her, and the look in his eyes wasn't comforting. If anything, it felt colder now that the others were gone. "You're coming with me," he said simply. Lena felt her breath catch. "Where?" she asked gently. "To the station," he said. "We'll talk there. And you can't stay here alone." His words were calm, but his tone left no room for argument. Her heart pounded as she realized the night wasn't getting safer. The trouble she feared hadn't ended. It had only changed shape. And now, she was alone with the sheriff. The sheriff's truck door creaked when he opened it, and the sound echoed across the empty road. Lena stood still beside her broken car, her fingers curled tight around her flashlight. The night felt heavier now, as if the darkness itself was watching her. The sheriff didn't rush her, but he didn't look patient either. He simply waited, expecting her to walk toward the truck. Lena looked back at her car one more time. It seemed strange how minutes ago her biggest worry had been the broken engine. Now everything felt different. The sheriff's calmness didn't comfort her. Instead, it made her uneasy. His eyes held something controlled and unreadable, as if he was thinking thoughts he wouldn't share. She took a slow breath to steady herself. She needed to appear calm, even if she didn't feel that way. "Can I lock my car first?" she asked gently. The sheriff shrugged. "Go ahead," he said. She moved to the driver's side, locked all the doors, and whispered a quiet promise to herself that she would return for it as soon as she could. Then she walked toward the truck, still trying to convince herself that going with the sheriff was safer than staying in the desert alone at night. But something inside her disagreed. When she reached the truck, the sheriff gestured toward the passenger door. She opened it and climbed in. The inside smelled faintly of dust and old leather. A stack of papers was scattered on the dashboard, and a thermos cup sat in the cup holder. The truck felt used, old, and somehow unfriendly. She buckled her seatbelt slowly. Sheriff Collins closed his door, started the engine, and began driving without saying anything. The headlights cut through the darkness, creating long shadows on the road. The engine hummed steadily, but the silence inside the truck felt louder than the night outside. Lena waited for him to speak. She didn't want to bother him, but she needed to understand what was happening. After several minutes, she finally gathered the courage to ask. "Sheriff, why exactly are we going to the station?" she said. He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on the road. "Protocol," he said. "When someone's stranded at night, we take them to town." "But the cowboys said town was close," Lena said softly. "Couldn't you just drop me somewhere safer?" The sheriff's jaw tightened slightly. "Town is a place too," he replied, not sounding amused. Lena lowered her eyes. She didn't want to argue, but she also didn't want misunderstandings. "I just want to make sure I'm not causing trouble," she said. He finally turned his head to look at her. His stare was brief, but strong. "People cause trouble when they don't follow direction," he said. "You refused help from locals. You questioned me. That makes things harder." Lena felt a pinch in her chest. His words weren't loud, but they carried weight. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to." "It doesn't matter now," he interrupted. The truck rolled forward, leaving her apology hanging in the air. Lena swallowed and looked out the window. The desert looked endless. Even the stars above felt distant. After a few minutes, she tried again, choosing her words more carefully. "I didn't want to leave my car with strangers," she said. "That's all. I just didn't know who to trust." The sheriff snorted softly. "If you can't trust the people of this town, who can you trust?" The way he said it made Lena feel like he wasn't simply asking a question. He was making a point. She looked down at her hands and noticed her fingers were trembling slightly. She rested them on her lap to hide the movement. The road curved, and the sheriff slowed the truck as they entered the outskirts of the town. Small houses appeared, most of them dark except for a porch light or a dim lamp inside. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that comes from a town that closes early and minds its own business. Lena kept her eyes on the passing houses. "Does your station stay open all night?" she asked in a low voice. The sheriff nodded. "Always." She wondered what the station looked like. She imagined bright lights, maps on walls, a faint smell of coffee, a place with people who followed rules. Maybe there were other officers she could speak to. Maybe someone else could help her call a tow truck. Those thoughts gave her a small sense of comfort. They drove deeper into the town. The main street had a few shops, a bakery, a small market, a hardware store, and a diner with a flickering sign. Everything looked peaceful, almost sleepy. The only sound was the truck's engine. But as they passed the diner, Lena saw two older men sitting on a bench outside. They watched the truck with curious eyes. Their attention lingered on her for a moment. She wondered what they saw. A tired traveler or someone who looked nervous. She hoped her uneasiness wasn't too visible. The sheriff turned onto another street, less busy than the main one. A row of buildings stood quietly, and one of them had a small metal sign that read, "County Sheriff's Office." The building wasn't big. It looked more like an old general store that had been turned into a station. A single light above the door flickered, making the place look even older. He parked the truck. "We're here," he said. Lena unbuckled her seatbelt slowly. Her body felt heavy as she stepped out. The cool night air touched her skin again, but she didn't feel calmer. The sheriff walked ahead, expecting her to follow. She took a deep breath and stepped behind him. Inside, the station was quiet. A desk sat in the center with papers and folders stacked unevenly. A coffee machine hummed in the corner. A bulletin board on the wall held several flyers. Missing pets, community events, old reminders. There were two doors. One with a small window that led to an office, and one that looked like it led to a storage room. No other officers were present. The building felt hollow. The sheriff walked behind the front desk. He picked up a clipboard and scanned a few lines before speaking. "Sit," he said, pointing to a chair near the wall. Lena sat down slowly. He wrote something on the clipboard. She watched his hand move, but she couldn't see what he was writing. The silence made her uneasy again. She rubbed her hands together quietly, trying to warm them. After a moment, he looked up. "Name," he said. She straightened. Lena. Lena Hart. Address? She gave it. Reason for travel? To visit my aunt. He wrote without looking at her. Why so late at night? My job. I couldn't leave earlier. He nodded but didn't smile. She hesitated before speaking again. Sheriff Collins, is everything all right? He lowered the clipboard and looked at her directly. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. You asked for help, he said. I'm helping. Yes, she said softly. Thank you. But you made things harder by refusing the cowboys' help, he continued. This town isn't used to people questioning how things work. Lena felt a rush of worry. I wasn't trying to question anything, I just didn't feel comfortable. And why not? He asked quickly. His question caught her off guard. I don't know them, she answered. You don't know me either, he said. Her heart dropped. She didn't know what he wanted her to say. She looked down, trying to calm her breathing. I'm not here to cause trouble, she whispered. I'm only trying to figure out what I should do. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just watched her. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, filling the silence. Finally, he stood up. Stay here, he said. I need to check something. He walked toward the back room and opened the door. Before stepping inside, he paused and looked at her again, not with concern, but with a strange mix of curiosity and calculation. Then he closed the door behind him. Lena sat alone in the quiet station. Her mind raced. She didn't know what the sheriff was planning, and she didn't know who else worked here. She looked around the room, searching for clues or comfort, but everything felt distant. She wanted to trust someone. She wanted to believe she was safe. But something in her heart whispered that the night was far from over. Lena sat in the quiet station, listening to the faint ticking of the wall clock. Every second felt stretched, as if time were moving slower around her. She stared at the closed door the sheriff had slipped behind, wondering what he was really doing. She tried to convince herself that everything was normal, that he was checking paperwork or contacting someone or preparing instructions for her. But the uneasy feeling in her chest refused to fade. She shifted in the chair. Her hands were cold, so she rubbed them together gently. She looked at the front door of the station. It wasn't locked, but she didn't want to walk out without permission. The last thing she wanted was to appear like she was causing trouble. She just wanted the night to end calmly. After several long minutes, she stood up to stretch her legs. The floorboards creaked lightly under her shoes. She walked to the bulletin board on the wall, pretending to read the faded flyers just to distract her thoughts. One flyer showed a lost dog. Another was a reminder about the town's autumn festival. Everything on the board suggested a small, simple town with simple people. It didn't match the strange heaviness she felt in the room. She turned when she heard footsteps behind the closed door. The sound was slow, as if the sheriff were moving carefully. The knob turned, and the door opened. Sheriff Collins stepped out, holding a thin file in his hand. His face gave nothing away. No smile, no frustration, just that same unreadable expression. He walked toward the desk again without speaking. Lena returned to her chair. The sheriff placed the file on the desk, opened it, and scanned the papers inside. She watched, trying to read his mood, but he didn't reveal anything. After a moment, he said, "Your aunt. What's her name?" The question seemed simple, but his tone made it feel like a test. "Her name is Marion," Lena said softly. "Marion Hart." He nodded slowly. "She moved here recently?" "Yes, a few months ago." "Why?" Lena hesitated. "She wanted a quieter life. She retired early." The sheriff hummed a short sound as if processing that information. He closed the file and tapped it lightly with his fingers. "I tried calling the number you gave," he said. "Your aunt didn't answer." Lena blinked. "Maybe she's asleep," she said. "She usually goes to bed early." "Maybe," he said. though his tone sounded unconvinced. Lena's stomach tightened again. She didn't know what the sheriff expected from her or what she was supposed to say to satisfy him. She shifted in her seat. "Is there anything else needed for the form?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and looked at her with a long, thoughtful stare. "You're nervous," he said. The statement made her heart jump. "I'm just tired," she said. "It's been a long day." "Long days don't make people this tense." Lena's cheeks warmed. She didn't like being examined that way. "I'm not tense," she insisted gently. The sheriff raised an eyebrow as if he didn't believe her. "City people come here expecting everything to be like their world," he said. "Rules, schedules, instant help. But towns like ours work differently. People trust each other. They don't question every little thing." Lena folded her hands in her lap. "I understand," she said quietly. "I wasn't trying to question anything. I just wanted to stay near my car." "Your car is fine," he said. "But you're too worried for someone who only had engine trouble." The way he said it made her uncomfortable. It sounded as if he was accusing her of something she didn't understand. She looked down at the floor before speaking. "I'm just overwhelmed," she whispered. The sheriff stood up. "Get up," he said. Her eyes widened slightly. "Why?" "I'm taking you to another room," he said. "We need to finish some things." The way he said it made her legs feel weak, but she didn't argue. She rose slowly and followed him toward the hallway near the back of the room. Every step made her nerves rise higher. The hallway was dimly lit. Only one small light in the ceiling flickered weakly. The sheriff walked ahead at an unhurried pace, not looking back to see if she was following. Lena kept a small distance between them, her eyes searching the hallway for anything familiar or comforting. He stopped in front of a door on the left and opened it. The room inside wasn't large. A filing cabinet sat in the corner, and a table stood in the center with 2 chairs. The walls were plain. It looked like a room people used for small discussions or private paperwork. "Sit," the sheriff said. Lena sat on one of the chairs. The sheriff placed a folder on the table and took the seat across from her. He opened the folder slowly, as though giving her time to settle her thoughts. He didn't start speaking right away. He simply watched her again, searching for something she couldn't define. Finally, he asked, "What made you uncomfortable about the men earlier?" Lena felt her breath catch. She wasn't sure how to answer. She didn't want to accuse anyone. She didn't want to create more tension. She wanted everything to stay peaceful. "They were drinking," she said gently, "and it felt unsafe to leave with people I didn't know." "That's it?" he asked, almost as if expecting something more. "Yes," she said softly. "That's it." The sheriff leaned back in his chair. "Dale can be loud, but he's harmless. People here know him." "I understand," Lena said, "but I don't know him." He drummed his fingers lightly on the table. "You think I brought you here because of them?" he said. Lena swallowed. "I don't know why I'm here," she admitted honestly. He looked at her for a long moment before replying. "I'm trying to understand you," he said. "Tourists usually act scared when their car breaks down, but you're different. You're jumpy, watching everything, thinking too much." Lena lowered her gaze. "I didn't mean to seem that way." "I didn't say it was wrong," he replied. "I'm just seeing it." His voice wasn't harsh, but it wasn't gentle either. It was firm, steady, and thoughtful. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or more worried. The sheriff stood up and walked to the filing cabinet. He opened a drawer, pulled out a small notebook, and returned to the table. "Your aunt," he said. "Where exactly does she live?" Lena gave the address. He wrote it down. He closed the notebook. "I'll drive you there," he said. Lena's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "You will?" "Yes. You don't need to stay at the station." Relief washed over her, even if only slightly. Seeing a familiar face, her aunt's face, would make everything better. She nodded quickly. "Thank you," she said with genuine gratitude. The sheriff didn't smile. "Wait here," he said. "I'll get the keys." He left the room. The door remained open, allowing her to hear the faint sounds of him moving around in the main office. Lena exhaled shakily. She finally felt like she was getting somewhere, like the night might turn calm again. She stood up, pacing the small room to ease her tension. She looked at the window in the corner, a tiny glass square that showed part of the quiet street outside. The moon hung low, casting a pale glow over the road. As she stared out the window, something strange caught her eye. A figure stood across the street near the corner of a dark building. It didn't move. It didn't wave. It simply watched the sheriff's office. Lena froze. The figure shifted slightly as if adjusting their stance. For a moment, she thought it might be one of the cowboys, but the distance was too far to see clearly. The shadow blended with the night. Before she could look longer, she heard footsteps returning. The sheriff appeared in the doorway. "Let's go," he said. Lena glanced once more toward the window, but the figure was gone. She followed the sheriff out of the station, her heart beating a little faster now. She didn't know who the shadow belonged to or why they were watching. And as she stepped into the night again, she realized something. The town looked peaceful on the outside. But something beneath the surface felt completely wrong. The night seemed heavier than before, as if the whole desert had gone silent after sensing the tension on that lonely stretch of road. Lena stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Her heart was pounding loudly in her chest, and her hands trembled slightly. She tried to stay strong, but the fear and pressure she had been holding inside all night were starting to break through. She wanted to run, but she had nowhere to go. Her broken car stood behind her like a helpless witness, and the drunk cowboy and the sheriff stood in front of her like a wall. Sheriff Collins stepped forward and said something she couldn't fully understand, but his tone made her feel even more unsafe. Dale, the drunk cowboy, laughed in a strange, uneven way, swaying slightly. He looked confident because he knew the sheriff stood with him. Lena felt small and powerless standing between them. She took a slow step back, hoping they wouldn't notice, but the sheriff's sharp eyes caught every movement. "Stay right there," he said firmly. His voice was calm, but there was nothing comforting about it. Lena swallowed hard and nodded, trying not to show how frightened she was. She had survived the night this far, but she knew this moment could change everything. She silently prayed someone, anyone, would come. And her silent hope didn't go unheard. Far in the distance, the faint sound of engines began to grow louder. At first, it was just a soft hum. Then it became clearer, like a sign of life traveling across the endless open land. Dale and even the sheriff turned their heads slightly, confused. The sheriff frowned and narrowed his eyes at the approaching noise. Within seconds, 2 state officer vehicles came into view. Their headlights cut sharply across the dark road, illuminating the dust rising behind their tires. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She didn't know if she should feel relieved or scared. She had no idea if these new officers were reliable or just friends of the sheriff. But when the vehicles stopped and the officers stepped out, she noticed something that brought her the first spark of hope she had felt all night. Their expressions were serious, firm, steady, not mocking or careless. They didn't greet the sheriff with lazy smiles. They didn't nod toward the cowboys like friends. Instead, they stared at the scene with the focused attention of people who knew something was wrong. The sheriff instantly changed his posture. His shoulders went stiff and he put on a rehearsed smile. "Evening," he said, pretending everything was normal. The lead state officer, a tall man with a calm face, didn't smile back. He walked toward Lena first, not the sheriff. His eyes scanned the fear on her face, the broken car behind her, and the way Dale stood too close for comfort. "Ma'am," he said softly, "are you all right? Do you need help?" The moment someone finally asked her that question in a sincere way, Lena almost felt tears rise again, but she held them back. She nodded slowly. I need help, she whispered. The officer gave her a reassuring nod, then stepped slightly in front of her, placing himself between her and Dale. Another officer walked toward Dale and the sheriff. The sheriff tried to speak again. There's no problem here. The lady— Sheriff Collins, the officer interrupted politely but firmly. We received a report. We need to review something. The sheriff's face changed instantly. His smile disappeared. A report? From who? He demanded. The officer didn't answer. He simply reached for his radio and signaled the others. Then one of the officers pulled out a phone and played a video. It was Evan's recording. Everything was there. The sheriff's dismissive tone, the way he ignored Lena's fear, the way he stood with Dale instead of helping her. The recording caught the entire atmosphere so clearly that it felt like reliving the moment. Lena stared in shock. She didn't know someone had been watching. She didn't know someone had cared enough to call for help. Sheriff Collins's eyes widened. This is taken out of context, he said quickly. This is— But the officer didn't give him space to twist the truth. Sheriff, please step aside. Dale, suddenly realizing things were going wrong for him, tried to speak too. Hey, I didn't do anything. She misunderstood. I was just trying to help her. The officers exchanged looks, as if they had heard that same excuse many times before. One officer calmly stepped behind Dale, asking him to place his hands where they could see them. Dale's face turned pale. Wait, what is this? I didn't do anything. Lena watched quietly, her hands pressed to her chest. She wasn't angry. She wasn't vengeful. She was just exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. She wanted this nightmare to end. The sheriff tried to walk toward the state officers as if trying to reclaim authority, but one of them blocked him gently. Sheriff Collins, you are being placed under temporary detainment while we investigate. We need you to remain calm and cooperate. The sheriff's face burned red. His voice rose. You can't do this. I'm the law in this town. But for the first time, he realized he wasn't above the law. Two officers guided him aside, speaking to him firmly but respectfully. Dale was also handcuffed, though he continued arguing in disbelief. Once the sheriff and Dale were secured, the lead officer returned to Lena. She felt her whole body relax, as if a huge weight had finally been lifted off her shoulders. You're safe now, he said. Lena nodded. She whispered, Thank you, even though the word didn't feel enough for what they had done. The officer asked her a few simple questions, nothing overwhelming, just details to make sure she was all right. After that, they helped her move away from the tense scene. As she stood beside one of the patrol cars, she saw a familiar figure riding toward them on a horse. Evan. His horse slowed as he came closer, and he gently dismounted. He walked toward Lena with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need praise but deserved it. You okay? He asked softly. Lena nodded again, but this time with genuine relief. Yes, she said. Thank you for helping me. Evan shook his head modestly. I just did what anyone should have done. You didn't deserve what happened tonight. The officers approached Evan and thanked him for the recording. They said his quick action prevented something dangerous from happening. Evan just nodded politely, still avoiding attention, still humble. The officers arranged for Lena's car to be towed into town. Evan offered to wait with her while the tow truck arrived, and she gladly accepted. For the first time since her car broke down, Lena felt she could breathe again. As the sheriff's vehicle drove away with its lights flashing, a strange calm filled the air. The drunk cowboy remained silent for the first time all night as he was taken away too. The desert that had felt threatening now felt peaceful again, as if justice had reset the balance. Lena looked at the stars above. They seemed brighter now. She realized that even in the darkest nights, good people could appear from unexpected places. She realized that being alone didn't always mean being unprotected. And she realized that courage didn't always come from strength. It sometimes came from the moment you decide to ask for help, even silently. When the tow truck arrived, Evan walked with her, helping her gather her things. She thanked him once more, and he simply smiled. "Safe travels," he said gently, and this time she knew she would be safe. As she left the small desert town behind, Lena felt grateful for the stranger who stepped forward, the officers who listened, and the quiet bravery that finally guided her out of danger. The long night was over, and with the sunrise ahead, she felt stronger than before, ready to continue her journey, knowing she had survived something she never expected to face.